A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I'm sitting on a new one right now. I'm the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 2 of the Overthrows podcast. And as you might know from previous week, we've split up Uncovered into Uncovered and Overthrows. Overthrows will be all the on-cricket stuff. I'm Behram Qazi, who you can find at deafmango, and with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who you can find everywhere. And lots to talk about on the field today. Let's start with India versus England. And India have leveled the 5-match series 1-1 in Vizag. They won the test on day 4 by 106 runs. And while there were many standout performances, which we will discuss in, entirety and thoroughly, let's start with Jasprit Bumrah, right? 9 wickets in the game, player of the match, including a 6-wicket haul in the first innings. He bowled exceptionally well in Hyderabad, and it seemed like he couldn't top that in Asian conditions. And then he produced this sort of, performance in Vizag, somehow topped that. And Jared Shayan, our colleague, he informed us that ever since he's returned from his injury, Jasprit Bumrah has bagged 59 wickets across all 3 formats. In I don't know the number of games, but basically at an average of less than 16, and that includes 4 test matches where he has taken 26 wickets at less than 12 apiece, 11.66 if I'm not wrong. How does he do? How does he possibly do it?
Do you know what? So his bowling average at the moment, I think, is slightly less than Malcolm Marshall. And if you go back, and many people thought that Malcolm Marshall was the best bowler of all time. I think that's very, very fair. If you compare him to the other greats of his era, he was just a lot more rounded. So it wasn't that he had a better outswinger than Hadley or Lilly. It's just that he also could swing it the other way and he could seam it. And he basically mastered all the skills of fast bowling that were available at that stage, right? You would have to say that Jasprit Bumrah is the same, right? So there are things that Rabada does that are more interesting. That sort of the general, the havoc that he can create from a ball to ball, but he's not accurate like Bumrah, right? And, he's not miserly like Bumrah. And Cummins is an incredibly skillful, I would say Cummins is still the most accurate seam bowler of that pace I've seen. I think he's even marginally more accurate than Bumrah. But Bumrah has about 7 extra skills that Cummins doesn't have, right? Like, for instance, Bumrah now has the ability to, Cummins now has the ability to bowl the wobble ball and swing it, right? And it's very hard to do both, right? Most bowlers generally, when they go to the wobble ball, give up on swing. It's taken him a while. Whereas Bumrah's been able to do both for quite some time, right? And
he reverses it.
I was going to say, I mean, and again, Cummins can reverse it, but he's not as good at reversing as Bumrah, right? Cummins has a good wrist position for the wobble ball, but his normal wrist position is perfectly adequate for a 90-mile-an-hour bowler. Perfectly adequate, it's underselling it. It's great for a 90-mile-an-hour bowler. Whereas Bumrah's would be great if you're bowling at 75 miles an hour, right? Like every little skill that he has, the only thing he doesn't have is height. But because of his action, he gets a little bit more bounce than probably someone his height should. He can bowl in Asian conditions. He can bowl in center conditions. He can bowl with the white ball when it's brand new. He can bowl with the white ball when it's old. What's a point in the game, what's a form of cricket that we currently have where it wouldn't be a well above average result giving him the ball, right? Like he does absolutely everything. And, the big thing early on was his record's great, and obviously he's a fantastic bowler. How will that translate to India? Well, or to home, I should say, and Asia in general, I suppose. How will that translate? Well, taking 9 wickets against a team that has faced a lot of seam bowling before in Asia is incredible. And the wicket was I thought the wicket helped him and Anderson at times. I don't think, Anderson bowled brilliantly. And at no stage did I sit there and go, oh, Anderson should take 9 in this game. I thought Anderson should end up with 5 or 6 and be really handy and keep the run rate down and everything else. Whereas looking back on it, Bumrah could have taken more wickets.
Literally, it was an amazing display of fast bowling. And he is now the second fastest Asian bowler to 150 wickets. Only Waqar Younis is ahead of him. And there are a lot of big names that he has basically eclipsed over here. And
exactly.
He might be one of the best ever, probably a case for the best ever seam bowler to have come out of Asia. And again, there's some Pakistani greats in there, the Waqars, Wasims, Imrans. So that's quite a compliment. And
the Waqar thing, let's just stop on the Waqar, because there's an argument that I think Waqar was a single usage bowler in that he was basically incredibly fast with swing, right? It's not to say that he wasn't good in English conditions, right? But he didn't really get bounced because he bowled it quite low arm. He wasn't particularly accurate where the ball went down, because if you bowl that, he was that much quicker than everyone else. He didn't need to be, and all those sorts of things, right? And at a time when reverse swing really was only just getting perfected, and he was probably a yard quicker than everyone else in world cricket, he bowled absolutely brilliant. But it's a bit like, I'm trying to think of someone else who's been like, maybe it's a little bit like Malinga, or Alan Davidson is maybe another good example of just the right bowler at the right time and end up with a great record because they have all those skills. Whereas that's why, and he does, and he was absolutely brilliant. And if you saw peak Waqar, you could see why Pakistan played him for another 10 years when he could barely bowl, right? It made the dream of Waqar was hard to give up on. But you look at him compared to Bumrah, and you're just like, well, Bumrah's got 7 or 8 extra things that he could give you in a game that Waqar just didn't have, right?
Yeah.
And Waqar had a better Yorker and better with reverse swing, but he didn't have all the other things that he needed. And that's the difference. Instead of just being great at one thing, like Shoaib Akhtar and Waqar Younis, because I think those are 2 of the Asian seamers that were right up there in terms of taking wickets at a similar rate to him.
Yep.
They just didn't have all the other things that Bumrah has.
Yeah, the skill set, really, the artillery of tricks that he has is quite unparalleled. And he bowled some absolute seeds in this test. He flattened the off stumps of Ben Stokes, who was really not having any of it. He was frustrated from the looks of it. And also Tom Hartley to win the game. But that delivery, in which Bumrah obliterated middle and leg stump with a searing Yorker to dismiss the hero of Hyderabad, Ollie Pope, the man who just scored 196 to win England a test match in India. That was something else. There were shades of Shoaib Akhtar versus Ashley Giles from late 2005 in that, because both of those stumps were clattered and uprooted. But this was just different gravy. This might be one of the best dismissals that I've ever seen.
It's a fantastic Yorker. I think it was Cricket Metric. I think it was them who put the tweet up about all the different Yorkers, and there were all these people just saying, "No, you've missed this Yorker and you've missed that Yorker." He's just had so many. I was commentating this week with Darren Goff. Me and him were in London with the rest of the team were out in India. Darren Goff was, after Waqar Younis, probably one of the, and Shoaib Akhtar, he was right up there with one of the best Yorker bowlers of his era.
Yeah.
And in another era, he probably would have been the best if he hadn't run into those 2 guys, right? And he was just in awe of that particular delivery. And I think Gideon Haigh wrote an entire article about the history of Yorkers because of that. That particular delivery. And Goffey was saying that when you bowl one like that and the stumps end up akimbo, right? He was saying generally a cricketer will get the photo, find the photographer who's taking the best photo, and get that printed up at his house. But Goffey was saying, in Bumrah's case, he's probably got 25 of those already. Is it even worth? Is that his favorite one? But he's got something else, and it does tell you just how much carnage he's managed to do, and probably, I suppose, since Shoaib Akhtar, I don't think we've had and Malinga, but Malinga is different only because his Yorker was very different. But since Shoaib Akhtar, we probably haven't had another bowler with that level of Yorker, right? Like I'm just going to bring it out now, and there's not much you're going to be able to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, with Shoaib, you think of those two deliveries that he bowled to Sachin and Dravid, right? Back in the Kolkata test of the Asian Test Championship, if I'm not wrong. But this one is fresh. There's more media around. There's better quality. And I've seen the clip like 10,000 times already. Like, I just don't get sick of it. So I feel like, for all the young fans, this is going to be one of those memories that's going to play in their minds over and over again. And it's just phenomenal. Like, I was wowed in the first test, and he only took 6 wickets in that one. Over here, he took 9. And someone recently asked me on Twitter, I think, that who is your go-to all format cricketer? They said cricketer. And I did not think twice. I said Jasprit Bumrah. Because any format, any phase of the game, I'd have him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I mean. He's just on another level at the moment. And this is going to sound weird, but there is an advantage to being an Asian seamer, right? And I think there's a lot of Asian seamers that would quibble with me, but hopefully they'll let me finish the sentence. There's an advantage in, and I always thought this with the Pakistani bowlers, that you actually have to learn a lot of more skills, or you have to be particularly brilliant at one or two things, whether it be pace or swing or whatever it may be, because you don't have a choice, right? You're going to have to bowl with a ball that's going to swing for about 4 overs, then it's going to stop swinging. You're going to have to bowl a couple of dog spells in the middle. And then later on, if you can't perfect reverse swing, you're not going to help. And I remember talking to Steve Harmison. And so I said to Harmy that I thought Pat Cummins was the most accurate the most accurate 90 mile an hour bowler we've ever had. And he said that the reason that we are seeing bowlers like Pat Cummins is because in white ball cricket, you can't be like Steve Harmison. Right? You can't come in and whack down 5 wides, right? You can't bowl short and wide outside off stump. So bowlers have been groomed to, not in a sexual predator way, but in a cricket way, to bowl this more accurate, higher skill bowling. And, the other thing that Harmy was talking about is the slower balls, right? Like he bowled a slow ball, but even he laughed. The only person who thought he had a good slow ball was Michael Clark. No one else in the world ever did, because he used to cock his wrist. You can't do that sort of stuff anymore because people watch. All these sorts of things. So modern bowlers are getting better and better at all that. So if you think of Bumrah, you have someone who obviously has elite bowling. We're talking about the top 20 bowling talents in seam bowling cricket history, right?
Yeah.
Right at this stage, he may not get there because he may not take enough wickets. But if you're just talking pure talent, he's probably already on that list, right? He's then had to come through the Asian conditions where he's had to improvise. He had to come through the tape ball situation. He's someone who learnt the Yorker before he learnt length, right? All those sorts of things. So he had to learn all the soft skills of being an Asian seam bowler. Then he had to learn all the skills of being a white ball bowler. And then he took all those and he made those into a red ball thing. So he's in a unique situation. And right, you'd still rather be a seamer in England and just get your county contract every year and take 60 wickets. But he's in a unique situation that he's had to work all these things through one by one, which means that he is probably the most fully rounded fast bowler that we have ever had, right? And who knows what Dale Steyn or Malcolm Marshall would have done. They were both kind of elite bowlers in their eras, right? And Pat Cummins, it makes sense for Pat Cummins to run in and hit the top of off every single ball, right? Because on Australian wickets, that is something. Whereas Bumrah can't do that. So he has to continually fix stuff around. And I know he's not like an Ashwin level communicator, right? But there's no doubt that he sees the game in a very Ashwin-like way. And that's the other thing that I've always thought with him. He's basically a spinner at 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, he's extremely intelligent. And I think you make a very valid point about him having to learn a lot more at a very early stage, because he himself said that he probably picked up reverse before conventional swing, right? So
yeah, that was another one.
Challenges. They are the challenges of an Asian fast bowler, and I'm sure a lot of people in Pakistan or bowlers in Pakistan will also relate to that. And it's a similar story.
It's a tape ball cricket thing as well, isn't it? There's an element of tape ball cricket which sort of teaches you how to bowl one day more cricket than anything else, and also you learn how to swing the ball. Whereas probably in most countries, maybe outside of England and New Zealand, but in most countries, West Indies, South Africa, Australia, those sorts of places, you're probably learning to run in and try and just hit the wicket or hit the seam, right? Which is a very uncomplicated way of learning how to bowl, right? Yep. Whereas tape ball cricketers, they're already at, learning this other thing. And then you throw in all those other bits we just talked about. It's a fascinating way. And as you said, if you can learn reverse swing, let me tell you a story. Do you know why reverse swing works?
Because there's like a shiny side and a rough side, and it creates like these aerodynamics.
That's why it happens. Do you know why it works? Why is it that a bowler can bowl conventional swing and the batters handle it completely fine? 5 overs later, they've roughed the ball up and it's going the other way. And suddenly they all look like they've never seen a bat before. Do you know why that is? So we used to think that was part of it, right? It turns out, I'm pretty sure cricketers have proven this now, it doesn't swing late, right? It does. I still think it swings in a slightly different trajectory to your eye, but that's not it. The reason is when a bowler is coming in, right, that the way that they are holding the ball still makes it look like they are going to be swinging it conventionally, and then it goes the other way. If you're like Martin Crowe, right, or Javed Miandad, and you see this happening, you just go, oh, fine. Okay, well, I could see that they're trying to swing it away, but actually it's going to come back in and I'll handle that, right? If you're a normal human being, right, there's a slight delay. And you can pick it up over time, but you probably won't pick it up in the first 5 or 6 balls, right? And it's that slight delay at 80 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, 95 miles an hour, you can't have, right? And it works very similar to the wrong-un, right? And it's a very similar kind of thing where even if you know this bowler has a wrong-un, you still have to be in a situation where you're like positive that is what they are doing, and then pick it out of their hand. So even if you see the wrong-un, in the old days, people used to try and pick it from the revolutions on the ball. That's a couple of meters later, right?
Yeah.
It's that little delay that causes all the problems. And I take it even further. Left-handers in the field, right? So when you hit the ball, someone said this, they were really upset when I said recently, the reason left-handers get so many run-outs is because people hit to the right-hand side, to the left-hand side of people and start to run. And this guy's like, how hard is it to remember that a left-hander is in that position in the field? And I said, even if you remember, it's the first 2 steps that you automatically take that can sometimes get the run-out. Right. It's all those little things. Anyway, I don't know what that has to do with Jasprit Bumrah, but here we are, 17 minutes in. He's really good. At
basically 18 minutes in, we have just spoken about Jasprit Bumrah, and Jared has given us a little tutorial on reverse swing. So that's why we split this podcast into 2, guys. And just for some more context, it's what, half a second that a batter gets to play a ball at 140 odd, something like that, right?
It's between 0.4 of a second and half a second. Yeah, I think you're right. And it takes 0.2 of a second to blink. Yeah.
So basically that fractional delay that Jared is talking about, that's the impact that has on the surface. We have Shubham Patil, Sam, Subhashish Bharali, Sheraton KD, and Quantify in the comments. You guys do have some questions. We have a lot to discuss. So if you really want your questions answered, send us a super chat and we'll take it on. Moving further, only 2 Indian batters crossed 50 across 2 innings in this test match, and both of them got to 3 figures. Yashasvi Jaiswal, however, doubled that up in the first innings by hitting a career best 209. And as things stand, Jared, his conversion rate in first-class cricket is better than that of Don Bradman. I know it's a small sample size right now, but that is still a remarkable feat.
Got to start somewhere if you're going to beat him.
You got to. And I mean, it was a really special knock, wasn't it? Because it sowed the seeds of an Indian victory on day one. Had Jaiswal even gotten out at 109, things would have been different because India won by 106 runs, right?
Yeah, I mean, he basically has won them the game. I know Bumrah is the difference, but you kind of feel that the spinners eventually would have chipped in enough outside of him, although maybe not because he took so many wickets. But Jaiswal is the one who set up the game to begin with. Look, he's a fantastic player. I still think there are signs with seam bowling that we need to see him improve. Having said that, Jimmy Anderson really worked him over. And I've seen Kemar Roach work him over before. He's definitely not terrible against seam bowling, but I think at the moment his batting average against seam is 33, and his batting average against spin is 110 or something. So there's a clear favourite there, but I love the way he moves, the way he thinks about his batting. He's aggressive, but he's not really Bazball-y aggressive, I don't think. He's just a more conventional, more a Quinton de Kock type, the way he thinks about his innings. But he's Quinton de Kock with, with all due respect to Quinton de Kock, but he's a next level above that kind of talent. I really, really like watching him play. And it was a fantastic innings. It was an interesting wicket because looking back on it, essentially, he was probably the only one who was ever completely set, all the way through, because, Shubman really struggled at the start. And the only thing that Jaiswal ever had an issue with was probably Anderson. But it was a tricky wicket. You saw that with everyone who made runs. Like, it took a toll on you. I do think it was probably a wicket where it was slightly easier to score against the new ball. Jaiswal made runs, and Zach Crawley made runs in both innings. That's not to take away from either of them. But I just thought that was maybe, you saw that with the chase. Like, England looked really good with the chase. And the minute that ball got soft, you're like, oh, this looks a bit tougher, which is, sometimes we see that in Asia, right? Because the ball just doesn't come on in the same way. And yet it's still spinning a little bit and keeping low and, occasional bounce and everything else. And it was Anderson was seaming the ball well into the innings, and Bumrah was certainly getting the ball to move around, with reverse and seam later on. So there was just something in it for the bowlers and the batters all the way through. So to make a double 100 on a wicket that isn't flat, right, is really something special, especially when no one else makes 50 in your side, in your innings.
Absolutely. And I think he also has impeccable range. And I'll tell you when I first saw him. It was the Under-19 World Cup in 2020, and Pakistan and India were playing the semi-final of that tournament, and Jaiswal smashed a ton. He really hasn't looked back since. IPL, he's been stellar. His start, or in an Indian shirt has been absolutely terrific. He scored that 170 odd on debut, and now he's bested that already. 6 tests in. Saurav Ganguly is the left-hander with most test runs for India at 7,200 and something. I see Yashasvi Jaiswal, eclipse him. And you mentioned all these great things that he brings to the table. I think he speaks really confidently as well, with a lot of purpose. And I won't dive deeper into his story, of course, because we have a Footmarks podcast upcoming in which we're going to, go over his story in entirety. But yeah, what an innings, what a knock. And Shubhan Patil actually has sent us a super chat, but his super chat just says, my question, guys. So you want us to find your question?
He might be. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. Wait.
He's got 2 questions, so I don't know which one he's asking us. Or okay, I'll take this one then. Behram, do you think Saim Ayub and Azam Khan should play in the World Cup 24 for Pakistan? I believe both of them should be in the squad because they had stellar CPLs. So yeah, let's see. Let's see the PSL and we'll know more. Jared, why does it seem that India is struggling in the second half of test matches?
I think England have a remarkable record in the third innings of test matches. Have we done a Footmarks about that, by the way?
Of India struggling in the second half of test matches?
England doing very well bowling in the third innings.
I don't think we have.
I'll try find the feature and send it to you because it's a really, really interesting conversation we never talk about enough in cricket. And I do think that England have cracked that particular part of the game. I think in this test, India batted poorly, and then the spinners probably didn't bowl brilliantly in that second innings. I think that was probably the major part. The other one, I'm trying to think what happened in the other one. What happened in the other one? Ollie Pope made runs, didn't he?
Yeah.
That he could have gone out early and you wouldn't be asking this question, maybe. I don't know. But thanks for the super chat.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's... Oh, well, there's that. I hope you got your questions answered. We answered both of them, Shubham, so you got 2 for the value of 1. Anyway, the other batter, of course, who excelled for India was Shubman Gill in the third innings. Yeah, I always get those confused. He scored 104, and there was heaps of pressure on Gill, Jared. He had barely scored any runs ever since he got demoted to number 3. It is a promotion of sorts, but of course, in the batting order, it's a demotion. And that innings that he just scored, it proves that, it's important to blood generational talents like Gill in test matches. We've seen it with Babar Azam and how Mickey stuck with him as well. And, sure, you'll have a Yashasvi Jaiswal sort of scenario as well, where they'll just hit the ground running. But that doesn't always happen. And Shubman Gill, we all know just how talented he is. So he could very well require some time to find his feet in the grueling format that is Test cricket. And a lot of people were after his head. I'm sure he silenced those guys.
Oh, he won't have, because that's not how Cricket Online works. But in fact, I think straight away they were like, I still wasn't that good against spin. I'm like, dudes. Yeah, I think on the Shubman Gill story, he's clearly an S-tier talent batting, right? So with that in mind, I think the worst thing you can do to players like that is yank them in, yank them out, yank them in, yank them out. Very different if you've got like a 27-year-old, doing something, coming into the game, and they're a professional and all those sorts of things. But like if you are, a 21 or a 22-year-old coming into the game, even 23, 24, all the way through to 25, right? And we know that you've already dominated a top-level international cricket. You don't need to be in a situation then where you're being yanked in and out, if your team can handle it, right? So, Australia did everything they could to keep Michael Clarke in that side as long as possible, because they didn't want him to get dropped and then, lose his confidence. And Prithvi Shaw, Damien Martin, we've seen really good batters get dropped early on in their career and struggle to come back. And in some cases, it's because they kind of go off the, mentally they lose it a little bit. And Damien Martin and Prithvi Shaw are both, again, S-tier level batting talents, right? And when it happens, it's quite awkward. In some ways, the crapper teams have a better time of it, because like Martin Crowe didn't start at the start of his career, right? Steve Waugh, I think, was averaging about 31. I think he made his first Test 100 on his 26th or 27th Test match. Bob Simpson was another player from Australia who makes a triple hundred in his as his first 100 after having played for a very long time. It does take a long time for some people to come good, but look at this kind of players I'm just talking about. These are generational players, right? And in Steve Waugh and Martin Crowe's positions, they didn't have a lot of pressure on them coming through. Those teams at those times weren't particularly strong, so they could hold them on a little bit longer. The problem when you go to the Damien Martin issue is that there was like 5 other Damien Martins. Like you could argue that Greg Blewett was a Damien Martin, right? And Ricky Ponting was a Damien Martin, and Justin Langer was there were heaps of those guys. Matthew Elliott and Martin Love. Like there were so many guys coming through who all would have been well above average Test players over a long period of time if they'd ever got to that position. So you can't just overreact and get rid of them. You need a better plan for that. And I do think modern cricket is in a better situation to do that than the old days, where it was like, Damien Martin disappeared to become, I think it was tried to become a travel agent in Perth or something, right? Like it's a bit different now, because what the worst case scenario is Shubman Gill's just going to dominate in Test cricket, in one day cricket. He's still going to get an IPL contract and everything else. So you do have a better system around these guys, but I think where possible, when you have a player like that, you want to carry them. The issue with Shubman Gill really wasn't Shubman Gill, right? It was the same issue that Pujara had and that Rahane had, and it's that you can't carry multiple players who are not making a lot of runs, especially when Kohli was another player. And I remember I remember a situation where Hussey, Katic, and Ponting were all on the side at the same time, and Australia had to make a decision of which one of them to drop, right? I would argue that Katic was in the best form of the three, but Hussey was Hussey and Ponting was Ponting, and so they got rid of Katic, and it was Ponting that really should have gone, right? And when you're doing that, that's kind of when it all gets a little bit icky, when your main players aren't making runs, then you've got a young guy not making any runs. If you put Shubman Gill into one of those fully functioning batting lineups of India in the past, it's like, mate, don't worry about it. Average 30 for the next 15 games. We got you. Because when you come good, we know you're going to carry the next generation, right?
Yeah.
But when no one's making runs, it's like, we're on your side, but at the same time, could you make some runs?
Also, I mean, we all frequently remember that GABA test, right? And Rishabh Pant. Let's not forget that Gill also had a 50 over there, right? If I'm not wrong, if memory serves me correct. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that's always baffled me when people say that Shubman Gill should be axed in totality. I mean, sure, there could be a situation in which you could potentially drop him, but I'd still keep him around that test team because we all know just what he's capable of. Anyway, another super chat. Sydney Koshman. I'm sorry if I butchered your name over there. It's got to be one of those two. Why does Ashwin have a reputation for being an Asia-only bowler when he's better in the West Indies and his economy is great everywhere? I mean, the West Indies is also spin bowling conditions, but
yeah,
Ashwin's
that's why.
Good.
I mean,
yeah.
Essentially, if you look at the tests that he's played in the West Indies, it's usually on the pitches that have spun, which is still hilarious that the West Indies keep doing that when realistically you would have thought, I mean, now that it won't matter because India have a great seam attack, but it did seem odd for a long time that they kept rolling out their spin-friendly wickets, especially because they weren't particularly good at spin. A bit different now. They've got Moti coming through, but the West Indies isn't the good argument. The good argument really is that I think he averages 28 in England. I don't know what his record is in New Zealand, but I think he's okay. I don't know if he's played that much in New Zealand. He's worked his way from being really poor in Australia to being really good. The same reason that people say Jimmy Anderson can only bowl under clouds, and we just saw him bowl absolutely brilliant spells in India, right? Like, we know these guys are better than that, but they are more specialist. I suppose it's the Vernon Philander thing, right? Of Vernon Philander averages like 20 in South Africa or something ridiculous, and then averages 28 everywhere else, and everyone's like, oh, well, his record's only so good because he's in South Africa. And I'm like, well, a record of 28's really good, everyone. It's just that he's so much better at home, you're looking down on him, right? Like, so there's a big difference between David Warner, who averages, 33 away from home and 60 at home, right? And, I don't know, Steve Smith, who averages like 48 away from home and 65 at home or whatever. It's like, well, he's still really good in both places. So you won't look at that. Whereas with Warner, you're like, well, in one place, he's under a replacement level opener, and in the other at home, he's a great. That is a much bigger issue, and I think with Ashwin, I also think he would have been a much better overseas bowler if talking about ruining young players. I thought he was fantastic in that first tour he played in Australia. Didn't get a lot of wickets. They yanked him around around a little bit, and they didn't play him overseas enough after that. If you're a young off spinner in Australia, you're not going to take any wickets. My God. Unless you're Suck Lane Mushtaq and you just invented a ball that no one can play, you're not going to do very well.
Yeah, and also, I think that point that you brought up is very important, that he didn't get a lot of games, right? India always strengthened their batting depth with Jadeja. And to be fair, that's a good option to have. I mean,
it's
that's
not... Yeah, exactly.
Tough call, right?
No, there's absolutely no issue with doing that at all. I think I think Ashwin has talked about that as well. Like, he understands it. But I do think early in his career, especially when Jadeja wasn't as good as he is now, there was a lot of times they picked Jadeja, and Jadeja isn't, he's not I don't know the best way of putting it, but Jadeja is more like Nathan Lyon, more of a plug-and-play bowler. Whereas I think Ashwin needs to work his way into different situations, and he just didn't bowl on enough pitches that weren't Asian. We know he can do it, and I still think that they should just pick both of them every time they play a test, no matter where it is. But I can understand why they don't do that.
Yeah, it is a head scratcher, and often, I've been wondering that why doesn't Ashwin play more tests? But then again, it's not like the other rationale is like batshit crazy, right? Anyway, speaking of spin bowling, England's inexperienced spin trio of Rehan Ahmed, Tom Hartley, and Shoaib Bashir, the latter making his test debut, and all three of these guys had like 3 tests between them coming into this Vizag test match. They outperformed India's uber-skilled spin attack and experienced as well, if you consider Ashwin at least, because Jadeja was out of this one. And how big of a positive do you think that is for England moving forward in this series?
What if I said it was a negative?
It was a negative because they're only going to be playing one pacer?
No, it's a negative because that's the only time I think they're ever going to outbowl the Indian spinners, and they lost the match.
That's true.
I can't see them outbowling the Indian spinners in another game after
also,
this.
They're not going to get a weaker Indian 11 again in this series. This was the weakest that they would ever be.
Ashwin is currently going through Twitter for every person who is saying that the England bowlers have outbowled him in this. Right? Do you know what I mean? Like, I find it really hard. I just looked a little bit flat at times. It was interesting. I thought that might be a wicket that would help him, but it didn't seem to work particularly that well. Who was the other? Kuldeep weirdly got the most inconsistent bounce. I thought he bowled well, but he looked a little slow to me at times. I'm not sure what was happening there. Ashwin, I thought was coming good at times, but never looked like the Ashwin that we had seen. Again, I think that was, for England, an almost ideal pitch for them to steal another win. Similar enough to Hyderabad, good for seam bowling. The Indian spinners without Jadeja didn't look as good. Just a bunch of little things that went in their favour, and they've lost that game. So, look, if you want to go through the amount of bad balls that both spin lineups bowled, I think it's fair to say that I know which ones actually bowled better in the game, even if the England bowlers got better figures. But the Indian batters are the bigger question, I think, than the English spinners, because I don't know what's going on with the Indian batters. They are just... Yeah. And there's not even one pattern, because they batted very differently if you look at all 4 innings, it's kind of been different things at all times. The first one, they obviously just didn't kick on because they didn't think it was going to be that important. The second one was... that chase under pressure, fine. The third one, they were saved by one guy, but no one else. They had that period where, Akshar and Barrett came in and they did look a little bit weaker with their batting. And their third innings, I still don't really know how they ended up only making that amount of runs and giving England any chance of chasing anything. It's been bizarre cricket, I think, from India's batters so far. And as I said, in many different ways.
Yeah, they've been soft dismissals, but they've all been different kinds of soft dismissals. And it's just been weird because you seem like they're looking good out there and they're going to go on and convert this into a big score. But ultimately, only 2 guys crossed 50 all test match. And luckily for India, those guys, made it count. They went big. You mentioned Jimmy Anderson before. Of course, he bowled pretty well in this game. Basically went for no runs, bare minimum. Took 5 wickets across both innings, and his test tally is up to 695 wickets now. The man is 42 this year, Jared, and he did almost touch 140 clicks in this game as well. That's more than the average speed of Shaheen Afridi as things stand currently. Would you say that Jimmy is the Sachin Tendulkar of fast bowling, at least when it comes to longevity?
Yes, I would have thought that Courtney Walsh still has bowled more professional deliveries. We'd have to check, and maybe I'm wrong. So Courtney Walsh is remarkable as well, because I wonder if Courtney Walsh actually played more county cricket than Jimmy Anderson did. Maybe he didn't. But, Courtney Walsh would have played in that ODI period as well, played all 3 formats all the way through in his career. So he bowled, let's just have a look here. He bowled 105,000 balls. What is Jimmy Anderson? Do you know how many Jimmy Anderson's bowled off the top of your head? I don't know why you would know that. I don't know why anyone would know that.
I have no idea how you would assume that I would know that.
Jimmy Anderson has bowled, is this right? 30. Yeah. Did I just give Courtney Walsh just a bunch of extra deliveries there? Or is that actually honestly true? Okay. Oh my God. I'm getting confused.
105,000 for Courtney.
That can't be right. So 37,000, 38,000 professional balls for Jimmy Anderson. And let me just see if I got... Yeah, 105,000 for Courtney Walsh.
Oh, wow.
So I think it is... You always have to be honest here and say that... And Courtney Walsh would be honest with this, that it's much easier to bowl at the lower level than it is at the top level. But that does show you that it has happened before. They both bowled, into their older age. But perhaps that makes Courtney Walsh the Jack Hobbs and Jimmy Anderson the Sachin Tendulkar in some ways. But they're both remarkable athletes who could kind of bowled forever and were incredible for their teams everywhere they played. But the thing with Jimmy Anderson is, I think, because of his age, every time he plays a bad game now, it's like, oh, he's finally past it. And then he just plays good again. So I can't work out at the moment. What we're seeing is that bit where old players still every 3 or 4 games are themselves, and then the other games they're not.
Interestingly enough, Jimmy has been poor in England, whereas in Asia he's been really good. Even in the Pakistan series, he was phenomenal, and he was far better than Mark Wood in this series thus far. I mean, those 5 wickets had high impact, and Shubman Gill in the first innings as well at that time was a big wicket. It's interesting to see how his career unfolds. I do see him crossing Vaughan. I don't see him crossing Murli.
So how many is he off Vaughan? 50?
He's off
40?
by 13. 13. Just 13.
Oh, 13. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, it is, isn't it? Yeah, so Murali is a distance away, isn't he? Look, there shouldn't be anything that stops him taking over Vaughan unless he explodes a part of his body, right? Like, I mean, it would have to be a pretty catastrophic injury from here on in. Look, it's been a wild journey, and the fact that it just keeps going is always incredible to me. And he really is. I love his skills, but I don't think we talk about his athleticism enough. Like, and Courtney Walsh, we just talked about, is probably someone right in that thing of just like, these guys just have because you've got to have fast twitch muscles to be able to bowl fast, right? So I don't want to get too much into sports science, but you need an element of fast twitch muscles to be able to bowl fast. But those two, and mostly fast twitch athletes, are sprinters, right? And yet, those two are endurance athletes as well. Like, the combination of doing that for, Jimmy's been a professional for 23, 24 years. Courtney Walsh, maybe even a little bit longer. I can't remember his full career. It just doesn't make any sense what they've been able to do. And, it's a miraculous effort to still be bowling at the level that Jimmy Anderson is at that age. There really aren't many people who've ever been able to do that before.
Yeah, and I mean, if you call Courtney Walsh the Jack Hobbs of bowling and Jimmy the Sachin of bowling, that means that Ryan Harris is the Misbah of bowling, maybe, because he was a late bloomer.
What would Ryan Harris be? Yeah. I don't even know. Don't get me started on Ryan Harris. We're 41 minutes in and we haven't finished the first friggin' test that we're talking about yet.
Yeah. Virat Kohli is going to be back for the 3rd test, and birds or little birds at Crick Buzz tell us that Jasprit Bumrah might be rested. Now, Kohli will probably replace Patidar, but is that more to lose for India if Bumrah goes out and Kohli comes in?
I mean, based on the form of so far, yes. Jadeja not playing as well. If you don't have Jadeja and Bumrah in one side, I still think India's the better team, and I think England have kind of slightly overperformed at the moment. As I said, I think they probably, looking back on it, this might be the test that causes them to lose the series, because I think the wicket was quite handy and they played some decent cricket at times. So they certainly gave themselves a chance in this game. I think, looking back on it, but if India go into a test match without Bumrah and Jadeja, who's your main seamer? So Siraj comes back as your main seamer.
Yeah.
If Siraj doesn't take a burst of wickets at one stage, then it's down to Ashwin and Akshar. As I said, Akshar didn't look to me, not that he looked injured or anything. He just didn't look as dynamic as we've seen before. Might just be that the wicket was didn't suit him as much. But I thought there's quite a lot of bounce in that pitch, and I thought he could be a real handful. He maybe wasn't as much, but so that puts a lot of pressure back on Ashwin, who's bowled well, but not Ashwin well so far.
Yeah. Yeah, and England will be doing a lot of soul searching when they reach the UAE for that little break between test matches.
Is soul searching code for drinking and golf?
Perhaps. And cigars, of course. Zach Crawley, as you said, earned his cigars, right? Scored twin 70s. So there's a guy
that's the best I've seen him bat in a test match.
Yeah, and he was the only English batter to cross 50 as well. So props to Zach Crawley over there. Before we end this, how good was Ben Foakes behind the stumps?
Yeah, I thought there were times in the first test where I thought he was a little bit scrappier, but I think looking back, him and Barrett have actually been struggling. These 2 wickets have actually caused some issues for wicket keepers, I think, at times. I called the catch, I called the Shreyas Iyer wicket fluky, and people got a bit upset. They were like, it's not fluky, it was a brilliant catch. And I was like, it's fluky because the chances are when a ball keeps low of you getting an edge and it going through to the wicketkeeper, almost non-existent. And for a wicketkeeper to have their hands anywhere near it, the catch was sensational. The fact that he got an edge and it went through the wicketkeeper was the fluky bit. But yeah, we certainly saw some brilliant work from him in the field, with the gloves on. With the batting, I know he batted better in the second innings. but at times he's very good at staying in, but he's just not putting any pressure back on the Indians at the moment. And I think Ben Stokes even had a word with him, to just try and put some pressure back on. But his wicket-keeping's been top class. I think we will see, we may not see Barrett, they may replace him, but I don't think we'll see a batting wicket-keeper in this series. I think we'll see wicket-keepers that bat, even if they make a change with Barrett.
Yeah, let's see how Folks fares in the remainder of the series. I know a lot of people in England are happy that he's in the squad. I'm a fan as well. I like Ben Folks. But anyway, on that note, we'll end this segment. You're with Behram and Jared watching Overthrows. We'll be back after this short break.
If you have always wanted to turn your passion for sports into a career, well, I have the course for you. Fans with Laptops is the multimedia course that I came up with after millions of reads, views, and listens to all my work. It's designed for anyone to use their own fandom to get better at making content on the sport they love. Go to Fans with Laptops today. If me talking live about cricket is not enough, we also have an entire channel dedicated to the best stories in cricket called Good Areas. Find out what matchups really mean, understand the logic behind baseball, and look at the most important selection in the history of cricket of Basil D'Oliveira. Come and visit us a couple of times a week on the Good Areas channel for a new video.
Welcome back to Overthrows. You're with Behram and Jared, and we've got Josh Ford, Vishwas Acharya, Arko, Register. All of them have joined us in the comments. If you really want one of those questions answered, guys, send in a super chat and we'll take it on. But right now, we'll be talking about Sri Lanka versus Afghanistan. And Sri Lanka have comprehensively defeated Afghanistan in the solitary test match that was being played in Colombo by 10 wickets. And Prabhat Jayasuriya, once again, player of the match, bagged 8 wickets in the game, including a 5-wicket haul in the second innings. And Jared, to me, it seems like when it comes to these home tests, where Sri Lanka generally tend to do well, when it comes to bowlers, they just have this lone trump card in Prabhat Jayasuriya, and when he doesn't play well, they don't win.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got a really good bowling attack at the moment in limited overs cricket, like quite a rounded, Hasaranga and Tikshana and, the various quicks, left arm, right arm, tall, fast, all sorts of things. When you look at their test lineup, and this is probably more of a question for Estelle than it is for me, but I look at their test lineup and I'm like, well, if it spins a goal, they're going to be a handful. But outside of that, I think you'd be pretty confident in playing them. Was it Jayasuriya who kind of bowled? Was it Jayasuriya who took all the wickets against England? Or was it another left-arm finger spinner, wasn't it? They've had a couple of left-arm finger spinners, I think, in the last few years come through, last 5 or 6 years. But everything else looks to have stagnated a little bit. I thought Afghanistan worked their way back into this game and then and then unfortunately gave it away. So they'll be disappointed from that perspective. It's also a little bit disappointing. It's a one-off test. I'm right in that, aren't I? That was it. Yeah,
You are.
A little bit disappointing. It's a one-off test and everything. Like if Afghanistan seemed to be playing better as the game went on, and then they don't have another test again. So is that really going to help them? But Sri Lanka will be more than happy at getting. I was going to say getting away with it, but winning quite easily was it after the 3rd day? Was it the morning of the 4th day when Afghanistan collapsed? Whichever morning it was.
Might have been morning of the 4th day. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, Afghanistan looked like they were going to make them work for it, and Sri Lanka worked themselves back into the game. So I saw little bits of this. I certainly saw Angelo Matthews being dismissed off perhaps the worst delivery of all time, which was a short, wide bouncer down the leg side that he tried to sweep fine for a cheap boundary and smashed his own stumps with his bat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard Steve Harmison. So I talked the dismissals through to Steve Harmison, who was like, who first said, well, at least it wasn't the worst delivery ever bowled in Test cricket. We were like, no, but it's the worst one to get a wicket. And Harmy was like, yeah, I didn't even get a wicket with mine. So, yeah, I think it certainly made I know I showed it to a lot of cricketers, and they were just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. I mean, I am loving Angelo Matthews' arc over here, right? He came back into the fold. He's actually made some performances, got timed out, cried about it, but has continued to perform with both bat and ball. I know he doesn't bowl in Test cricket as much, but in the limited overs games, he was bowling quite well. Scored 141 before that comical dismissal, of course, which no one will ever forget. He's made a habit of comical dismissals off late, and KS Ahmed will definitely be happy that he got a wicket off that ball. And of course, that wasn't the only batting performance. Matthews 141, also Dinesh Chandimal scored 107. But the performance that stands out for me is Dimut Karunaratne scoring a 72 ball 77 in the first innings. And then in the second innings, when Sri Lanka came out to bat, he scores an unbeaten 32 of 22 deliveries. And I never thought I would live to see the day that this would happen.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got him and Shan Masood kind of changing what they do. And quite late in both their careers, they'd both be over 30. I mean, Karunaratne would definitely be, but Shan would be 31, 32, wouldn't he?
34 maybe.
I mean, Shan's maybe slightly different because he's probably changed the way he's batted about 8 times. Shan's like one of those people that whatever the last self-help book he's read is, that's how he plays, right? Like, you know, there's an element about that where he's like a constant searcher for the universal truth. And when he retires, he'd be like, oh, I probably could have just batted the same way I started and I would have ended up with roughly the same record. But yeah, Karunaratne is interesting. I think we are seeing a lot of players who are, I mean, the second innings one is probably less interesting just because of what it was. But I do think we are seeing a lot of players who are understanding the tenets of baseball, if not fully committing to, you know, all of it, but just thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute here. You know, in this situation, I can be more aggressive. Why have I just been pushing this ball for 1 or 2 when I can hit that ball for 4, put pressure back on the other team? So I do think we are seeing a slight change with the way that teams are thinking about it, which is also not problematic for England, but it means that within 3 or 4 years, we're going to see a lot of players who believe in parts of baseball. And we're already seeing teams sort of adapt parts of it as well. So it won't just be England on their own.
It's weird how he's credited Usman Khwaja for someone who he's followed his template and how he considers Khwaja to be the benchmark of test openers right now, which isn't false, but that is not how Usman Khwaja bats. That's the interesting part, right?
Yeah, do you know what? There was a season where Usman Khawaja went absolutely ballistic in the Big Bash. I reckon it was like 5 or 6 games. It might have even been less than that. And Khawaja can go. Khawaja probably has become more like a traditional player that over time you just chip away all your attacking shots. And to be fair with Khawaja, he kind of only ever hit the ball square. And over time, I think if you're limited with your scoring options, you slow down naturally just because teams just start to put fielders out there, right? And start to bowl to plans that don't allow you to do that. But yeah, certainly, it would be surprising if Khawaja came out and played an innings of roughly a run a ball and then slogged his way to a 10-wicket victory now. I think we'd all be pretty shocked at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty shocked at Dimut's performance, but it's good. Sri Lankan fans should be excited, and he does want to play 100 test matches. So let's see how this remainder or twilight of his career, fares. But anyway, let's move to Afghanistan, of course. Playing in his 6th test match, opening the batting, Ibrahim Zadran scored 114 in the 3rd innings, fought his way back or helped Afghanistan fight their way back into the game. And at one point, it seemed like they might just make a fist of this before they collapsed. He's already impressed greatly in ODI cricket. He's got some scores in T20s, but more so in anchor, doesn't really accelerate. Jonathan Trott loves him, and there's good reason for him to have that love. And we have seen signs from Ibrahim Zadran over and over again, even throughout the ODI World Cup, where it seems like he's the answer to Afghanistan's batting woes in the long run. He also, Jared, presented his uncle, Noor Ali Zadran, his test cap. How frequently do you get to see that? A nephew presenting his uncle a test cap. And it truly was a one-of-a-kind first in cricket, for me at least.
It would have to be, wouldn't it? I mean, maybe the only thing would be Ireland or Papua New Guinea. I can't think of another cricket culture that would actually be in a situation, a major cricket culture anyway, that would be in a situation where they would do that. But yeah, it's hilarious. Look, what's he average in one-day cricket? 50, 51?
Quite high, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I've got a feeling I've looked this up recently for something else I was writing. I think his runs are against oh, that's Test cricket. That's not going to help me. I think his runs are against fairly good teams as well. So he's got 2 ODI hundreds against Sri Lanka, 1 against Australia, 1 against Bangladesh, and then 1 against Zimbabwe. It's not like he's making his ODI hundreds, against qualifying level teams and everything else. So, absolutely. I suppose what I'm trying to say is I bought it already. But an innings like this from behind, when the team was really quite low, I think it just shows. But he kind of just knows what he's doing. You watch him, and he might be an issue in white ball cricket going ahead just because strike rate. But if they do play a lot of test matches, I would expect him to have a really, really good record. I think he averages around
40, I think.
Yeah, 39, 40, something like that at the moment.
Something like that. I mean, he had 350s prior to this 100, and this 100 should help, right?
Yeah, so if he, I suppose what I'm saying is if they can get a guy who can average 40 at the top of the order for the next 10 years, if you look at developing test nations, that's one of the kind of the harder things are the top order players who make runs and the generally strike bowlers. Those are the two things that you struggle to find as test nations when you first begin. So, having, middle order players and stock bowlers and all those you can kind of find, but that strike bowler and, real top order rocks who are averaging like a good amount, not just averaging 33 and being plucky and standing there for you. So I think it's a really exciting development, even though he's not particularly an exciting player. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way. He's more of an elegant player than an exciting player. But I just think this is what Afghanistan need to do, is start producing just batters that, are not just looking to hit everything for six and can bat really long time and understand batting. And I could see, knowing Trotty a little bit, I could see why Trotty would like all these things.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's still young and he's developing and he's had a terrific start to his international career. He can be that run accumulator for Afghanistan going into the future. They already have one in Rahmat Shah, who did quite well in this match, 91 in the first innings and 54 in the second. But
They're
we
building
already
a few of them.
Yeah, we already knew that Rahmat was good at this. What I want to talk about is his dismissal in the first innings. I don't know if you caught that clip or not, but Sadira Samra Vikrama preempted the sweep shot from Rahmat to take an incredible catch down the leg side.
Oh, yes,
did
I
you
did
see
see that
clip?
one. Yeah.
It was
We haven't
amazing.
seen that in a while, have we? Like, I reckon Darren Sammy might have been one of the first players I saw to do that. And, there was someone in the England, I think it was in the first test, who had a good go at it. It's an incredible skill to be able to do. I can't imagine you have to be reading the game so well, but then you also need the athleticism to get over there. It's fantastic.
I saw the video in slow-mo, and the batter was sweeping in slow-mo, Rahmat. And this is a guy who was on 91, right? He's nearing 100. If you look at Sadira go at the back, it's not slow-mo. So imagine how quickly he must be moving in real time, which really is great. But yeah, to your earlier point, if they've got two of those guys, and Ibrahim and Rahmat, who can get them consistent runs, the rest of the guys can kind of accelerate around them. And if you get Afghanistan to like a par score, that spin bowling attack can definitely win you more games. And it's a team that I'll be keeping a very close eye on. Anyway, before we go into the break, Sankalp Verma has a super chat. And he's asking you something which might take us another 10 minutes. Hey, Jared, can you please give us a quick, basic explanatory intro to wobble ball? Heard it many times now, not be entirely sure of its details.
Okay, so traditionally bowlers would try and bowl with the seam dead straight. And when that ball would hit the seam, obviously it would go in either direction. And generally, because of the way your wrist releases the ball, you generally seam it one way or not both ways. And then, of course, there are some bowlers who have the ability to hit the seam like Curtly Ambrose and seam it in both different directions. But the batter can generally read what the bowler is going to do unless you are a Curtly Ambrose, Glenn McGrath type of bowler. And so that means that the batter knows that, okay, they're trying to hit the seam here, and if they hit the seam, it's going to come back in. And that's what I will set up for. The wobble ball is a ball where can just naturally seam in both different directions. And also there's no clue. Even the bowler, when it releases, doesn't know. So if you look at the Jimmy Anderson delivery, Jimmy Anderson, when he was asked about the magic delivery to Rohit Sharma, he goes, yeah, I mean, I didn't mean that. It just happened. And that's because all he was trying to do was get the wobble ball in the right area. So it would either nip back and hit the top of leg stump, straighten a little bit, hit the top of off stump, or straighten even more and maybe get an outside edge into slips or the wicket keeper. And it's basically a looser way of holding the seam. And it's a ridiculously easy thing to learn, but not a very easy thing to master. And there are a lot of bowlers who have done it traditionally by accident. We believe that Courtney Walsh was one. Sean Pollock was another one. There's a few older bowlers, Kate Cross, Tim Murtagh, who do it by accident. And that's part of their success, was this delivery they didn't even know they had. It does require really good wrist position. So it generally works better if you're a swing bowler, which traditionally, if you're a seam bowler and you're a swing bowler, they're two different things.
Yeah,
I did that as quickly as possible so Behram wouldn't end
There's
the
a
show.
great piece on this as well. I forgot who wrote it, but
Ben Ben.
Yes, Ben Gardner. Ben Gardner from
Gardner.
Wisden wrote a long, thorough piece on the wobble seam and how it's evolved and how, Mohammad Asif came into the picture, Stuart Clark came into the picture, Jimmy Anderson perfected it. That's the article you need to read if you didn't understand all of these things.
I've got a video. I've been working on it for 4 years, which is even more in depth than Ben's, which is why he got his. We were working on it at the same time. We were chatting about them at one stage. I will eventually get it out there. It's such a big project that every time I try and finish it, I can't. But I've probably got about 80,000 words of notes on this one delivery that I need to somehow bring in and make an article of. But it's a fascinating story. And what I love about it is it already existed. It's just what has happened is the ability to repeat it. And if you want to go back, the wrong one was exactly the same way. We know that there were leg spinners who accidentally bowled the wrong one, but they didn't know how to control it or what they were doing. And then when the wrong one completely takes over cricket, when people know how to repeat it and teach other people how to do it. And that's what happened with the wobble ball.
We did a footmarks on that, by the way, the Boson K one. So go and check that out. Anyway, on that note, we shall take another break on overthrows. You're with Behram and Jared. Stay tuned for Australia versus West Indies and a bit of New Zealand versus South Africa after this short break.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind-the-scenes stuff. Huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord. Express your cricket fandom with Bodyline t-shirts. Discover their extensive range of player-inspired tees, featuring cricket legends such as Murali, Warne, and Wazim. With team-themed designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds, they've got you covered no matter what your interest in cricket is.
Hello and welcome back to Overthrows. You're with Behram and Jared, and we've got some more people in the comments. We've got Register, Arco was there initially as well, and A22 and Carl Wells have also joined us. A lot of your questions we will answer because they're automatic talking points in today's show, and MD Zobair is also here. So Australia versus West Indies, let's start with that. Australia have taken an unassailable 2-0 lead over the West Indies in the ODI series at home. And one of the stories that have come out of the series is a 25-year-old right-arm pace bowler from South Australia, Xavier Bartlett. He took 4 for 17 on debut. And I haven't heard much about him, Jared. So enlighten me. What do you know about this young gun?
Yeah, I think there's, obviously... he's kind of been further down the pecking order. Spencer Johnson has taken up a lot of airtime recently. You've got Lance Morris as well. Am I missing someone else? No, I think it's just those two, isn't it? That everyone's been talking about.
Jai maybe. Jai was all the...
Well, Jai's that sort of previous generation, Riley Meredith as well. But,
yeah,
I think with Xavier Bartlett, this is very much an experimental team, right? They want to see how these players are going to go. Is it Matthew Short, Aaron Hardy, Fraser McGurk, Will Sutherland? Like they're trying a lot of different players. I've heard mixed results on Bartlett where they're not 100% sure, but they're going to take the wickets at the moment. But I think it's more just an exploratory thing of they want to know who that next generation is. They're pretty sure on Spencer Johnson. And obviously, with Aaron Hardy and Cameron Green and Mitch Marsh, if you want to throw in there, they've got some all-round depth available. But they want to see who the next sort of that crop is going to take over. And I've got a feeling. I'm trying to think that Bartlett played somewhere. Did he play in Australia a game? Oh no, it was at junior cricket. I remember when he came up in the under-19s. That was the first time I'd kind of heard of him. But it hadn't massively worked for him so far. But look, his first class record's pretty solid. White ball cricket, maybe not as much at the moment. But get him into the one days, see how he goes. I think it's a fair way of going about it. And to be fair, it's done, I'd take 4 for 17. You'd take 4 for 17, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Any day of the week, 4 for 17 is a great way to start your career in ODI cricket or any format for that matter. And I've seen a lot of fringe bowlers for Australia over the years. You mentioned a few. There's, what's the left armer's name? Who also went to the... Behrendorff. There's Behrendorff. Yeah. There's Billy Stanlake. We see these guys come and go. I hope that Bartlett maybe sticks around a bit because he's still 25 or whatever. So let's see how that goes.
If you look at Stanlake just couldn't do his body. Maybe he was too big, if we're being honest. Behrendorff just his body wouldn't allow him to do it. Jai Richardson, if you've seen Jai Richardson in full
Richardson
flight,
is really good. I love Jai Richardson, but he's always injured.
he's incredible. I mean, Pattinson is another one. So that I don't think the conveyor belt's massively the problem, but there did seem to be, outside of Pattinson, they didn't really find another bowler of that sort of to be able to push Stark and Cummins and Hazelwood. So it meant that if Hazelwood or Stark, not that, I mean, Hazelwood had a slight down period, but Stark's had some down periods. You kind of want Jai Richardson to be fit and just be pushing, because Jai Richardson is probably of that tier. Lance Morris, Riley Meredith, probably not quite at that level. Billy Stanlake, on pure what he should be able to do, could be the best bowler in the world, but it's clearly that's not going to happen. But so they do need guys pushing through a little bit more. You don't want to be in a situation where you have kind of Chris Tremaine, Jackson Bird, trying to think of some of the others.
Coulter Nile was there, but I think Coulter Nile was also
Kane Richardson.
Round. Yeah,
even Coulter Nile. I tell you what, young Coulter Nile, I thought would go on to be a much better bowler than he was. But yeah, so I think that you don't want it to be like a drop. And I think at times when they haven't picked their best players, it has been a bit of a drop. It's why they kept Siddle around, right?
I mean, remember that time where Dougie Bollinger came up the ranks, and from a fringe bowler, he became a regular bowler. Hilfenhaus, I think, same era. So they had that McGrath, Gillespie, and Lee trio, and then they went through this phase. And now you have Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, and it's inevitable that they're going to go through that phase again.
Exactly. And so, a Bartlett, I don't know if he's the answer, but, that's what they're kind of thinking at the moment, if we're being honest. And, they like a few different guys as well. Who's the guy that plays in the IPL that bowls all the back of the hand slower balls?
AJ Tai, Andrew Tai.
No, not him. He plays the younger guy with the blonde hair from Tasmania.
Nathan Ellis.
Nathan Ellis. So there's a few guys they like in different ways. But, you're not... Spencer Johnson... probably is. How old is he? Do you know how old he is?
He's not that old, right? I mean, before the 100, did we really know about him that much? I didn't.
No, we didn't know about him because he's been injured his whole life. So he's 28, right?
There you go.
And it's all because of the injuries. Like, if he was 24, 25, you'd probably just hand him the new ball quite soon, and you could ease off one of the other three. And maybe they still will. Like, I don't know. But the problem with him is, I could be wrong, but I'd just be worried about him. He's played 4 first-class games in his life, right? We just don't know if he can get through games, but clearly he's that level of talent from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I actually don't know why I mentioned Andrew Tai, because he got a lot of games for Australia, more games than he deserved probably, and. Another star performer for Australia with both bat and ball, actually, in the second ODI in particular, was Sean Abbott. He has been identified as a regular bench warmer for Australia prior to the ODI World Cup as well. He was phenomenal in the English county season, particularly with the bat. And he, brought that performance to the fore in this second ODI, where he scored 69 and then coupled that with a 3 for 40 in his 10 overs. This, to me, suggests that perhaps he might not be threatening any regular bowler's position, but perhaps he could be a better Marcus Stoinis for Australia come, Champions Trophy 2025.
He's probably not good enough to bat top 6. I think that's the issue. Look, he's always had batting talent. I remember, a long time back, maybe towards the beginning of the Big Bash when he was quite young, and I remember seeing him playing innings, go, this could be really interesting. It just never quite developed. And then I remember he was at Surrey with Gareth Batty, and Gareth Batty was telling me about his batting, and I said, "Have you got the right guy? And he's like, "No, you have to come and see him now. He has changed the way he's going." So look, I think he's again, he's more that Kane Richardson, Nathan Coulter Nile level of player, in that he's not going to force out one of the great players, but if he can bring it all together, he's got a lot of decent skills. He doesn't probably have one skill that's ever been elite enough to get him, full time into the Australian side. But if you get better at batting, it's sort of hard to overlook your bowling. It was not overlook your bowling. If you get better at batting, it kind of makes your bowling look better, even if it isn't. So I do think there's that is quite interesting. But yeah, I still think he's probably more a fringy squad member than anyone who's going to be in a starting 11. But who knows?
Yeah, I do see him as a regular fringe player now. I think he's always going to make the squad because they've literally locked him as that player. And you know how my predecessor Bharat used to wave the Michael Neser flag. I'm going to be waving the Sean Abbott flag because I just love the fact that he's the guy who was on the wrong end of the Phil Hughes incident. And to come back from that requires a lot of mental strength. And I'm a big admirer because of that. Also, I see some people who are saying that, they've asked some questions over here. We have a lot to cover. So if you really want your question to be answered, leave us a super chat and we'll take care of it. Also, Human Clone is giving us astronomy info in the comments. So that's interesting. Anyway.
Astronomy or astrology?
Is it? I always confuse the two, but basically all of those, stars and stuff.
He's telling us about stars, not Melbourne stars.
No, not the Melbourne Stars at all. He's telling us about whether it's the year of the dog or year of the tiger. I don't particularly follow.
But anyway, Sean Abbott, apparently.
Let's go back to the first ODI. Of course, there were a bunch of batting performances. Australia chased down 232 with 8 wickets in hand. What they like is that Cameron Green and Stephen Smith, they made unbeaten scores of 77 and 79. But what I'm keen to talk about is, Josh Inglis, he scored a 43 ball 65 and he came in as opener. He's batted as opener in both those games. David Warner has retired from ODIs. And I'm a little surprised that this is the direction that Australia have gone because, Josh Inglis versus Pace. We've spoken about this in the past. Do you see him as someone who could, make it as opener?
Look, I'm a massive fan of him, so I kind of hope he works it out. He's from WA, so he should be able to play pace. Yeah. But you're right. It's been a question mark so far in international cricket. I think they kind of just want to fit him in somewhere. And he's not real. I think they kind of want him to bat 3 and 4, or probably 4. Maybe 4 is probably where they want him to go. But there's some issues with the lineup of where he might fit in there. And so why not get him up the order and see if it works? They know he's got talent, so I don't think that's an issue. You see this sometimes with wicket keepers, don't you? They have to kind of just throw him around the order till they find a spot that works, and they can kind of build the batting order around him. But you're right to question it, but I don't know what the answer is going to be in the long run there.
Yeah, a 43 ball 65 is not a bad place to start. So here's to hoping that he can crack it. Let's move to the West Indies. Now, there hasn't been much to write home about in this ODI series, but they do have one standout performer with the bat, even though they've lost both games. And that guy is Casey Carty. He scored 88 in the first game and 40 in the second. And there was this 1-6 of his that went viral in which, he literally just effortlessly picked up the ball off his legs and deposited it into row Z into the stands. He's been around in the CPL for a while, Jared. I'm sure that you, having worked there, would have caught a bit of him. He's also only 26. So, is he someone you think that the West Indies can groom in those limited over squads?
Yeah, so my memory, I think he might have been one of the young players that we could get. So the CPL has this thing where you have to get 2 young players from onto your squad from I think it's the under-19 development squad. And I think he might have been around at that stage. And again, we see a player who is really, really talented who just hasn't developed particularly quickly. I think if he was from a major island, he probably would have developed quicker. But he's from, quickly Googles, is it St. Martin?
Oh, is it?
I want to say. I think he might be the first player from St. Martin to play for the West Indies. If it is St. Martin, it's certainly, I think he's the first player from his island to play cricket. And that's not to say that, if it is St. Martin, let's just go with St. Martin for now.
He's the Darren Sammy of his island, is he?
Yes. So if you look at Darren Sammy, there was Gary Mathurin and then Johnson Charles. So there was clearly an upswell in talent in St. Lucia at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And so there was something going on. It's still not the best island to be on as far as cricket because there's not as many coaches and all, you get this. There's lots of islands that are like this. I think this one's even more less crickety if it is the one I'm thinking of. Not to say they don't play there, just less professional crickety, I should say. That's probably why it's taken him this long to develop. My memory was that he was on a lot of CPL squads, but never got any games. So I don't think he's played much T20 cricket. But I certainly remember looking at clips of him when I was drafting players and working in the CPL and all those sorts of jobs. And he was on my radar. But again, I think we see another West Indian player who's developed a little bit later. That said, he looks like he can play. And there's something there, but I don't think I don't think he's if you look at his domestic record and you compare that to his one-day international record, I think it's probably fair to say at the moment that he is well above what his overall record should be. So I don't know. I worry about the pace of his scoring long term. But hey, he's making runs. Take him while they're giving them to you would be what I would say.
Plus, they're not going to be playing the Champions Trophy next year, so they have time to build a squad for the ODI World Cup. I mean, provided they make that tournament. Of course, there will be qualifiers and all of that, and the West Indies really, need to pull up their socks in that regard and at least qualify for that one. And for that, they have these young players who could potentially, get that for them. Lastly, on this subject or this series, Australia versus the West Indies, I was surprised to see a certain Roston Chase in the squad. Of course, he was a mainstay in West Indies test team and then got dropped. He is a veteran of 49 test matches. And back in the day, he won some crucial games with the ball. He had this world-class knock versus Pakistan in the 4th innings of the test. The how did he do that test match in which he was left stranded when Pakistan won their first series in the Caribbean.
Took an 8 for against England in a test match as well.
Yes, which are still, I think, the second best ever figures for the West Indies or something like that. He did all right in the series, right? Thus far, he got like 59 in the first game, 25 in the second. He wasn't penetrative with the ball, but he wasn't expensive either.
I don't think he's ever been penetrative with the ball, to be honest.
I mean, you just said he took an 8 for, but he hasn't been expensive at all.
It was the least penetrative 8 for you have ever seen. It was the dry humping of 8s. That's going to go on socials, isn't it? But look, he's just a professional cricketer. He's thorough, looks after his body. He's a good athlete, can bat, can bowl, probably doesn't move around the field as well as he did when he was younger, but could back in those days certainly move around the field. Tries very hard, does everything that you would like. Just probably not quite talented enough in any particular skill to be a frontline player in international cricket, but handy enough in a poorer team to be quite good. My memory of him, for the years going back, is he was actually a really good player of spin, but he was a epically bad player of seam bowling, and that was the thing that really held him back. So I wouldn't assume he's made masses of changes to his game since the last time I saw him. But he's still, as I said, he finds a way to stay relevant, and he keeps popping up. And I like professional players like him. I think it's an admirable talent, just to get the most out of yourself at all times. And he certainly has done that.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2017, the innings that I was talking about, that 4th innings 100 versus Pakistan, nearly won West Indies. Or didn't win West Indies that game, they nearly drew it. It was a career on the rise back then. Since then, it has nosedived. So I was weirdly happy to see him, in the squad. I was like, okay, Roston Chase is still around. But anyway, let's move to New Zealand versus South Africa so that we can finish up on overthrows and go to uncovered.
Just before we go ahead,
I
just looked it up while you were talking. Roston Chase averages 20 against seam bowling in all international cricket.
Now, that's a worry. Josh Ford says, loved early Roston Chase making those rearguard hundreds. That's what I remember as well. But it's been a while, hasn't it? So good that he got a 59 or whatever in the first game. Anyway, first test between New Zealand and depleted South Africa is underway currently at Mount Maunganui. And Rachin Ravindra, after having a breakthrough ODI World Cup with the bat, has hit a career best 240 in first-class cricket. Mind you, he has never hit these many runs in his red ball career. And after 6 failed outings in Test cricket, he has gone on and made this score. So does that suggest, Jared, that Rachin is here to stay in the long haul as a batter alone, as a primary batter?
Yeah, I think once we saw him in the World Cup, it would be hard to think that he wasn't going to stick around, right? And again, New Zealand have kind of done everything they can to not ruin him, but like he played as a bowler essentially in his first couple of tests. I can't remember if he batted at 6 or 7.
Something like that. Not in the top order.
I know I commentated on those, but I can't remember the full amount. And look, he's an opener domestically. He's got a pretty good. As far as opening in New Zealand cricket goes, he's got a pretty good record. Like, I think he averages just over 40 opening the batting. But he has struggled a little bit in other positions, and he's kind of batted everywhere at times. But, his overall average of 42 in first-class cricket, I think, is more than enough to believe that he's a test quality player. And the way we saw him play in white ball cricket, it would need to be like a Martin Guptill style technical fault in order to not be successful, would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I had actually heard of Rachin before he made his international debut because I have a bunch of New Zealand accounts that I follow on Twitter and I have good, relations with. They definitely mentioned him a fair few times that this is a kid who's going to come up the ranks and he'll be doing well. And when he eventually got picked for New Zealand, I was like, okay, why does he seem like a Michael Bracewell replacement over here? Which he was. Let's be honest, that's what he was at the start. And from there on, Kane's injury led him to, start up top for New Zealand in the World Cup. And he hasn't looked back since. He's been really, really good. And 240 is quite a score. So good on him. I hope that Rachin Ravindra is able to, light up games left, right, and center. Did he bag an IPL contract this time? I think he did.
He is in the IPL, isn't he?
Yeah. I think pretty sure he made it to the IPL. So that'll be a telling sort of juncture at his career. Kane Williamson, of course, is back from injury in his 97th test match. Surprising that he only still has 97, by the way, which is low-key sad. He has now hit his 30th ton in the format. And in the last 6 tests, I think he has 500s, all the while battling through these different kinds of injuries. And this is what I'm thinking. If I was New Zealand cricket, right? Maybe I would be incentivizing Kane to play test cricket here on, given that he is going to be turning 34 this year. And this is the format that he truly thrives in. Kane Williamson is not a, great T20 player. So might as well, have him cash in on tests because he's scoring all these hundreds. He's destined to enter the 10K club if he just carries on for a bit. What do you think?
I think he makes a lot of money from playing T20.
Mm-hmm. So can't they spare some? You've got to have Kane play over 100 test matches, which he will. But
I mean, he will. He'll get past 100, won't he? I don't know. There's not much to say about Kane in this. We know he's a good player. I mean, his big problem is making hundreds against the best teams consistently. And, he just made a run against, I don't know, what would you call this? South Africa E?
This is basically the lower tier. There's South Africa. Wait, there's England. There's South Africa. There's the Netherlands. And then there's whatever team is playing right now.
Yeah, it's pretty low. He made runs. I mean, I would have rested him. I would have rested probably a couple of key players for this and just taken the wins. I could see why they didn't do that. It's robbing the home fans, isn't it? The home fans are already being ripped off enough. Imagine Kane not playing. It would be a pain. But, as a selector or director of cricket or analyst, I would have been like, does he have to play?
I mean, 30 test 100 is still quite an accomplishment. I hope that he gets to 35, 36, maybe even 40. I mean, he does seem like the sort of guy who won't call it a day as quickly as maybe some other players, right? Because he doesn't play a lot of cricket all year. New Zealand don't play that much cricket. And I don't see him start in the IPL. I don't know. I see him benched in the IPL eventually. So let's see.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Final talking point of the overthrows for today. The debutant South African captain, Neil Brand. Of course, how frequently do you get to hear that phrase? Debutant XYZ captain, right? In Test cricket. He failed with the bat in his first outing as opener. And, with the ball, though, he took 6 for 119, his maiden innings in Test cricket. An all-rounder by trade. Brand had taken 72 wickets in 51 first-class games prior to this test. And he had never taken more than 4 wickets in an innings and more than 6 in a game. Here, in his first ever innings in Test cricket, he's taken 6 in 1 innings. So literally shattered all expectations and continued that trend of overperforming debutants in Test cricket off late. We've had a few, right? It's quite incredible. Maybe the long-term Dean Elgar replacement. Who knows?
It would be remarkable if that was the case. Look, if nothing else, have they not given themselves a potential top order batter for Asian tours who can bowl some spin, right?
They have.
That's the best case scenario out of this entire series for them. I find it hard to take it too seriously. Someone had to get the wickets eventually, otherwise New Zealand might have batted for all 5 days. So, but yeah, what is he, 27, 28?
Yeah, he's not that old.
Yeah.
And he actually averages close to 40 in domestic cricket, so he's not a bad option if he can, roll his arm, like you said, in
That's
in
what I
Asian
mean.
conditions.
Yeah, Michael Bracewell type player, perhaps, or someone like that gives you a couple of extra overs. It's a decent option for them. But yeah, if this is the highlight, then I hate to see what the lowlights are going to be. Maybe that was Ratchford making the 240.
I suppose so. I mean, they are destined to lose this test because they're languishing at 80 for 4. We're probably not even going to be covering that test.
We've already spent more time on this test than it deserves.
Yeah, basically. And on that note, that'll be the end of this week's Overthrows podcast. So to all of our listeners, thank you for joining in, and we'll be back with another episode of Overthrows next week. So thanks. And to everyone who's with us on YouTube, you can stay with us because Overthrows might be ending, but we're coming up with episode 70 of Uncovered. So stay tuned after this ad break. You'll be back with Jared and Behram, and we'll be talking about some of the off-field stuff.
If you have always wanted to turn your passion for sports into a career, well, I have the course for you. Fans with Laptops is the multimedia course that I came up with after millions of reads, views, and listens to all my work. It's designed for anyone to use their own fandom to get better at making content on the sport they love. Go to Fans with Laptops today. If me talking live about cricket is not enough, we also have an entire channel dedicated to the best stories in cricket called Good Areas. Find out what matchups really mean, understand the logic behind baseball, and look at the most important selection in the history of cricket of Basil D'Oliveira. Come and visit us a couple of times a week on the Good Areas channel for a new video.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 70 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram Qazi, who you can find at deafmango on Twitter, and with me is Jared Kimber, who you can find absolutely everywhere. Not much to talk about on Uncovered this week, Jared. Of course, we've rebranded it as the Cricket Current Affairs show, but one really interesting thing that came up out of that test match in which India just beat England in Vizag was that after Mohammad Hafiz took a dig at technology in that recent Australia-Pakistan series, this time it's Ben Stokes versus technology. He didn't quite agree with Zach Crawley's dismissal, which, DRS determined it was an LBW shout. And it has made headlines, which is weird.
Tell me all about. I'm learning about this because you got to remember that I spent about 16 hours working today, and so by the time Ben Stokes started talking, I was doing 8 other things. So I'm going to hear about this live. Tell me, take me through every moment.
So the dismissal that Zach Crawley, ultimately that got him, I think that Ben Stokes felt that it was just hitting. Oh, sorry, it wasn't supposed to hit based on the trajectory of the ball. But we've heard this story before, right? We heard it back when Saeed Ajmal got Sachin in the 2011 World Cup. And I'm not sure, you tell me about Hawkeye. How do these things even happen? And why is Stokes so skeptical?
Okay, I think there's a big issue here. And I'm reticent about telling people because if I start betting on cricket, it might be something I bet on, which is when we see the first replay, right, that close-up replay, and we're looking to see if the batter has hit the ball or not, people make most of their decisions on the LBW based on that replay, right? I don't know how many people know this. That camera is not deadly straight. It's an angled camera. It's usually slightly to the left of the pitch or slightly to the right of the pitch. As they have other cameras, they're the ones that are straight on. And my theory is that more often than not, and I've been watching the betting markets with this, Behram, and that was a perfect example of, I thought that was out straight away. When I saw that replay and I realized which side the camera was from, I was like, oh, everyone's going to think this is not out, but this is out. And I looked at the betting markets, and that's exactly, the money started coming in live on the trading markets, right, for not out, essentially. And I was like, no, this is going to be out. So I think that is an issue that sometimes confuses people a little bit, and so that is the first sort of close up that we get to see what is happening. So I think that is a reason. Essentially, it's almost like priming you. So by the time you've seen the Hawkeye, you've already decided the ball is probably coming down towards the leg stump. To be honest, I thought there was nothing wrong with that decision, but yeah. I'm not primed the way that other people are for that particular thing. And I think most of the issues that come when people go, oh, Hawkeye can't be right here. It's because they don't realize they've just seen a camera that's not straight in front. So I do think that plays a big part. Look, as far as Hawkeye goes, it's not 100%. Hawkeye, I've never said it's 100%. It is a predictive system. If we could predict the future, if Hawkeye could predict the future, they sure as shit wouldn't be helping cricket teams, right? Like they'd be doing something else. They'd be playing the stock market. They'd be, Biff in Back to the Future too, right? So, I'm glad you got that reference. Like everyone else.
Oh yeah, of course.
Everyone else is like, what the fuck's he talking? We're very
Seriously?
old, Behram.
Really, I would be hard pressed to think that not a lot. Like the majority of our viewers definitely have had to watch Back to the Future. I'm not from that era. I've watched it, right?
Yeah. Well, you're still old, but you're older than perhaps. But so there is an element of that. But I have absolutely no issue with the. I thought it pitched in line. I thought it hit him pretty much in front. It was always going to be, was it clipping? Was it taking enough of the stump? What part of it was hitting? There is a predictive part. Our players don't understand this. Obviously, me and Kartikeya have done a podcast about this before. There was another one. I want to say it was the Joe Root LBW, where I thought the Hawkeye attendant was really accurate at what frame they used for when the ball hit the pad, which meant that it probably saved Joe Root. If there was some frames missing or the Hawkeye person got it wrong by a single frame, I think Joe Root would have been given out LBW to Akshar Patel, right? That is what happens. Do you remember the one in the World Cup where they missed it? The Hawkeye attendant missed it by a single frame and it went from missing the stumps to hitting the stumps. That is what we are talking about. It is not that hard to get this wrong. But can I tell you this? If we didn't have it, Ben Stokes, you'd get a lot more worse decisions going on, and the umpires wouldn't be able to self-correct themselves as much as well. And so how is that a better situation? Maybe he should learn how to use DRS better rather than just him and Rohit Sharma. There's some Rohit Sharma's theory in DRS is literally, has 14 seconds gone? I should take it. Right? And Ben Stokes is just like, guys, we want this, right? We want this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see someone in the comments has mentioned that all 3 stumps were visible. They weren't. 2 stumps were visible, and the 3rd stump had Crawley's leg ahead of it. That's at least this whistle that I saw. And I mean, just to clarify, Ben Stokes didn't say that this is the reason England lost the test. He just said that technology is not 100%, and I believe that it was wrong on this occasion. But for him to go out of his way and talk about this, that's what was a bit strange in the first place for me.
Yeah, I mean, he said, I don't think it's unfair for someone to say that technology has got it wrong on this occasion. Yeah. I'm okay with that phrasing. I think he's wrong, though. I don't think it's unfair for me to say that Ben Stokes has got it wrong on this occasion. I had absolutely... I was commentating on an English radio station, and until you mentioned this, we all thought that was out. None of us, I don't remember there being a big discussion amongst us saying that we thought that was not out, right? And, you've got former England players commentating and, so I don't really understand it. But the truth is that small mistakes happen with DRS all the time in the way that mistakes happen with umpires and batters and bowlers and fielders all the time. If you want a perfect system, okay, let's invest $20 billion in technology to make sure that every single decision on a cricket field is made correctly. It ain't going to happen, right? So let's just accept that sometimes the marginal ones will go against you. The issue with England was not one LBW of Zach Crawley, although, obviously played a big part. How about the fact that Ben Stokes didn't fucking run for his run out, and that's why he was out, right? How about running hard when the ball's in the infield going to the right hand of a fielder? That's a bigger mistake. That is a far bigger mistake than this LBW DRS situation. I wanted to ask you something, just because I don't really understand it, and I know we don't have as much news this week, so I figure we might as well talk me through. And I'm already worried that this is going to go massively out of control. But kind of talk me through Imran Khan and what this means and how serious it is and everything else.
It's a tricky one. You've put me on the spot over here, and it's not something that you can talk about very freely in Pakistan. So I'll try to, vaguely cover this as quickly as I can.
Well, I suppose what I'm asking is from a cricket perspective, not from a cricket perspective. I don't think he's about to make a comeback.
Yeah.
But what I'm asking is this one of those occasions where sometimes people get charged with things and they get found guilty of them, and then a couple of months later it all disappears and it was just a political thing? Or is this more serious and it's going to linger one way or another? Like, where are we going with this?
So basically, Imran, his stint as prime minister was very polarizing. A lot of people were diehard fans, blind supporters, even you could say. And you can expect that with Imran Khan. And we've done an entire fan club episode on Babar Azam, right? It's not too dissimilar. Maybe perhaps
he was like that times 100, right? Like
exactly. That times 200.
I mean, the impact that, and Imran Khan wasn't just, like, Imran Khan had fanboys in Australia and England, right? Like, he was a proper jet-setting professional playboy legend cricketer, right? Like, it really on a different level, wasn't he?
He still is the Prince of Pakistan. Pakistanis take great pride in Imran's, but during his political reign as a prime minister in particular, he did polarize opinion. I have been a critic too at times, but it's not like Pakistan have amazing options everywhere that you'd say like, oh, not Imran, I want that guy. There is no that guy. So whilst I do believe that Imran made some mistakes in his time, he pandered to some religious outfits. It's not something that I'm a fan of. But what's happening right now is basically just a witch hunt, because it's all political. And they're basically doing this because they want to completely shatter him. And it's all blatantly obvious. And it's sad because, this is someone, for all his ills or whatever, he gave you a cancer hospital, right? And he's been that philanthropist, and he didn't really have anything to gain monetarily from this. Whatever his vision may be, you could agree or disagree, he did care for the country. That much I suppose we can all agree on. And it's just, we're at a point where the state is against him, which includes the main players and all the political parties. And I cannot name the main players. That's where we stand right now. And that's basically it. So I don't see this ending until Imran makes some sort of deal behind the door.
So that's what I was. I suppose that's one of the things I was wondering about, whether we get to a point where it's one of those things where it's the biggest deal in the world, and then you find out that it's just like, if you agree never to run for office again, we will drop absolutely everything.
Something like that. But Imran, he's not going to make that deal, is he?
He's probably not going to make that deal. I think so. There's two other interesting things that happened this week. Were you following the Yorkshire cricket situation?
A little bit.
So Colin Graves, who basically called the racism a bit of banter. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to completely. I don't know if that's a direct quote, but that's kind of the vibes that he was given. He's been voted back in as the chair of Yorkshire cricket, where he got 88% of the vote. And it's worth noting that I think they really had the members had a really interesting question, because I do think there are some members who probably voted for him despite the fact that they find him abhorrent, just because the club is going to be bankrupt. And so they're voting for someone that, and I would, without going and talking to people in Yorkshire, but I've obviously got friends up there. I know people who kind of said, the choice is between having someone who we don't particularly like, but still having a club, and not having a club. And the other option is that I think if Graves didn't come in, Yorkshire probably would have had to sell to overseas interests, which is a really fascinating twist. You start with probably the most famous county team, but it was going through financial problems already. You then sort of you throw in the whole racism thing and how that has changed their dynamic as an organization, from top to bottom. Then you've got Colin Graves, who wasn't even before the banter comment, not always the most popular person with some of the things he did as ECB chair and everything else. It's a fascinatingly weird situation when you consider that there are certainly Indian interests, and I don't know if there's interest from outside of India, but certainly Indian interests are looking at buying county teams. We know that the Hampshire one is a possibility. They've made calls about other teams as well. Like there's a genuine movement towards this. So I thought that was fascinating. And the other one was, and I'll ask your opinion on this, because we did an episode on Meg Lanning recently. Did you see Meg Lanning's comments?
No, I did not.
So Meg Lanning said, she said, either play more Test cricket or don't play it at all.
Wow.
I wonder, and I remember having this conversation when we were doing Death of a Gentleman, because occasionally we'd be asked about women's Test cricket. And our answer was pretty standard. Well, we can't fix men's Test cricket. How on earth do we think we're going to fix women's Test cricket, right? Like, and at that stage, so when we were making that around 2012, 2015, that sort of period, the women's white ball cricket was kind of, what we see now was taking off at that point. I don't think we knew it was going to be this big or anything. But when I was asked about it, I'd be like, if you're asking me, I would say, let's go with the thing that's working at the moment and push all our chips in. But, you know, I would like to see women's Test cricket, and I would like to see it thrive. And I love Test cricket. And, you know, I love the way that women play ODI cricket and T20 cricket. And I feel like I almost don't know how they play Test cricket. So I would love to see that kind of variation on it as well. But Meg Lanning's right. Like, I don't think you can have 3 formats of women's cricket. I just don't think it's... And like, if Susie Bates has never played a Test match, can we really say that women's Test cricket exists? Like, if we're being serious,
it's not the pinnacle, is it? It's definitely not the pinnacle because of a low sample size.
Did Sana Mir play Test cricket?
Probably a few games, I'm guessing.
Would she? I'm trying to think of how old she is. If she would have played against Ireland, no, she never played a Test either. That's two. That's 2 defining players, right, of women's cricket, and neither of them played a Test match. I would argue that women's Test cricket doesn't exist at that point. And do you know, I don't know if you knew this, but I didn't know that Pakistan and Ireland had played a women's Test until I got to Ireland for the men's Test. I just never had heard that story before. I get Meg Lanning, and I think me and Meg Lanning would probably be on the same side of this. Of we actually would prefer there to be women's Test cricket, but if you're not going to do it properly, like having one Test against, like India did great playing 2 Tests back to back, but against 2 different teams. Wouldn't it be great if it was if they started playing 2 Tests and 3 Tests? You know, even if it's just the major teams, we'd still say it's unsustainable. But I think it would be a fantastic thing. But I can't see the smaller nations getting behind women's Test cricket.
I can't either. I mean, when I can speak for Pakistan, we barely see them get behind women's cricket per se, period. So when it comes to Test cricket, that's even a different conversation. But I do think that there's enough interest now in India for them to at least have 2 to 3 Test match series with other nations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there is a market over there. And I see on Twitter all the time, so many of my Indian followers and people who I follow are literally just constantly talking about Indians women's cricket. It is the same in Pakistan. Unfortunately, the board doesn't really back it. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time that we live in. And I think Meg Lanning, maybe now she feels more empowered to make that comment now that she's retired, right? She's
playing more shots than she did when she was on the field. Although she played a lot of shots when she was on the field.
Yeah.
The only other interesting thing I saw in the cricket news this week was the Mitch Marsh, getting the Alan Border medal. I think Alan Border medals are a fascinating thing. So it's basically... ripping off the idea of Australian rules football and rugby league, who both have similar kinds of nights. And the Australian cricketers essentially wanted to dress up and go to an event that was in their honour and, take wives and girlfriends and partners and all those sorts of things. And now it's for husbands and boyfriends as well, that cricket is developing at the rate that it is. But it's a fascinating little event. But Mitch Marsh, did you see his speech?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, first, he chokes up while acknowledging, Patty and Ronnie, of course, his captain and coach, because they had all of that faith in him. And, it makes sense. This is a guy who was constantly trolled online and someone who received a lot of hate from the Australian public. And then he literally turned his story around ever since that Ashes test. And Pakistan helped him. I'd say that for sure. By dropping
Pakistan and England, right? Pakistan and England pretty much built his career. They were the only 2 teams he ever seemed to do anything against. Yeah, so they should get a chunk of that medal. Look, I don't know Mitch Marsh very well, but back when he was active on Twitter, we would chat quite a bit, sometimes publicly, but a lot privately occasionally as well. He's an incredibly honest person. And probably not built for social media, as you can see in that speech. But we've seen players win awards before and get emotional, and sometimes it's part of they think that they should feel like that. And I'm not having a go. Like, it's a weird. I would feel weird if I won an award and was in a similar kind of situation. Every time I've won an award, I've actually never been there to pick it up, so I don't know how I would react if we're being honest. But Mitch Marsh is just he is what he is. And I think it was just a beautiful moment to watch him open up like that. And as you said, it's not quite like being a Pakistani or an Indian player, the level of hate. But the Australian public, when they turn on you, they're not quiet about it. It's quite a public turning. It's less social media and a little bit more walking past you at the airport going, hey, how about some rounds, mate? Right? It's a little bit more in your face when the Australian fans turn on you. And they don't turn on many players, but they certainly had issues with Mitch Marsh for a long time. And this is the player that he's supposed to be, right? And you and I talk about this all the time. All-rounders, it takes a long time to develop. And sometimes, he's now a better... I remember writing about this years ago, about him and Ben Stokes. Ben Stokes was on the path to greatness and Mitch Marsh was on the path to kind of, being abused, essentially. He's now probably a better player than Ben Stokes. Obviously, Ben Stokes has the captaincy, so it's a little bit different there. But Ben Stokes can't bowl anymore, and Mitch Marsh is probably
overall
batting.
utility.
Yeah. So what a comeback that is, because I tell you what, I think I must have written about them both in 2015. And at that stage, you would have had long odds on Mitch Marsh ever being more use on a cricket field than Ben Stokes.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a phenomenal turnaround. And of course, there was that part of his speech where he choked up, but also he had that slapstick humor that he's known for, where he goes like, I'm a bit fat sometimes and I love a beer. That's basically Mitch Marsh for me. I don't know if you've watched The Test on Amazon or not, but there are these times where Mitch Marsh is just being a goof in that dressing room and everyone's feeding off of that energy.
Now he's said this. I don't know if I've ever actually said this publicly, but when he was at the academy, the running joke was when the players would turn up in the morning to bat, bowl, field, doing whatever they're doing, Mitch Marsh would always be running laps. And that's because he always got caught getting drunk. And he did have an alcohol problem, right? Him and his brother, I think. Luke Pomersbach, they had a really bad atmosphere in Western Australian cricket for a while. But the running joke was that they would just run Mitch Marsh around the field until he basically almost vomited out the alcohol from the night before. He's real, and I remember telling this story to I was on the Caribbean radio station once. It might have been a Jamaican station, and they were going on about West Indian fitness standards, blah blah blah. And you never see Australians unfit. And I was like, let me tell you a story about Mitch Marsh, right? And the reason that Mitch Marsh can do what he can is the professional structure around him, right? There were people there to hold him accountable, and he's a proper athlete. Like, he could have played Aussie rules football. I don't know if he would have been great at it, but he certainly would have played. He certainly would have played at the top level. He would have made that was the level he was going for. Just an incredible athlete from that point of view, and just a natural entertainer, as you said, kind of just an unguarded person. I think he left Twitter because Cricket Australia said, Mitch, we can't be involved with this anymore, because I remember him and Alex Hales were loose as fuck on Twitter in the early days. I can tell you that.
I mean, I saw a Ben Duckett tweet very recently from 2013, and I can describe that as loose as well. I'm not sure if you came across this or not.
I haven't seen that one.
Basically, he was describing MS Dhoni's wife/girlfriend. So, yeah.
I think
good
there's
luck
some Mitch
getting
Marsh.
Good luck getting a Chennai Super Kings contract.
Yeah, I think there's some Mitch Marsh ones that might be along similar veins, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, he is that sort of character, but also I've seen him play with a lot of freedom now. It seems like he has a clear head, and that's something that Pat Cummins has really achieved with his team. He's given his players that space to express themselves. Travis Head is another example.
I was about to say, isn't it incredible that they tried to harness Glenn Maxwell for years, and Pat Cummins, all the talk of Pat Cummins being woke and not being an alpha male and all this sort of stuff, he's letting these guys be themselves, which is dominant friggin' hitters of cricket balls. And the old alpha male masculine guys were like, no, tone it down. Oh, geez, Maxie, you're training weird in the nets, mate. We can't have you training weird in the nets. And with Mitch, it's like, I don't know, just go out and bash it and we'll see how you go. Do you want a second gully in and we'll see if we can get a wicket?
Yeah, and I truly think that Pat Cummins' captaincy and leadership is that catalyst that has kind of allowed these players to go and be themselves. Usman Khwaja is another, whether it be on the field or off the field. Did you catch that moment from the awards where his wife described his spirit animal as a sloth? And Usman Khwaja really took that personally. He did not like that comment. He kept justifying how he's not a sloth. That was funny. But yeah, that guy in the comment section who kept telling us that it's the year of the tiger or the year of the dog. It's the year of the bison. That's what it is. It's the year of Mitch Marsh. But anyway, I just also want to add a bit on the previous conversation. The reason I was so reserved talking about it is because there have been instances of people who've actually been taken away from their homes. So if you don't see me anymore, it's Jared's fault.
I don't pay you enough to be kidnapped, man. So, and do I have to pay a ransom? Would it be, or would it be just you disappear and we never see you again? Because
I would have to make some sort of deal. I'm guessing of never.
Of course you would. No, if that happens, we'll just do a podcast about your deal and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm
getting a deal out of Imran.
I've noticed a lot of people in cricket are not talking about it, and I understand why it's tricky for you guys. And I've been in trouble with some politicians before in those parts of the world, and I do understand all those sorts of things. But it's just from the outside, it's just so hard to know. Because especially with Pakistan, so much of the media is biased one side or the other, and it's like sometimes you just want to know roughly what we expect this to be. Is this the worst thing that's ever going to happen, or is it going to move on?
I'll give you a quick briefing again on that. Is that we have elections in 2 days. Okay, day after tomorrow we have elections in this country, and it's not a level playing field because Imran's party has been disbanded. They don't have a sign anymore, so each of those guys is standing in the elections as independents. So I'm not sure how that'll fare. But generally what I've noticed in life is that when you do this sort of thing to a party, you only rile up everyone and they end up voting for them. So I will not be surprised if Imran, comes back. Oh, hello.
This is live.
I don't care.
People are now seeing you around the world wondering why you're wearing a Minecraft onesie.
I need to
Borrow my iPad and get out.
But he really needs it. He's got things.
Shut the door. Stop talking.
Go watch Bluey.
So you're in the middle of this great. That's the last thing you'll ever say on this podcast because you'll be taken away and it's been completely ruined by my son.
Yeah, but I will not be surprised because look, I was an Imran Khan critic when he was in government. Not that I hated him, but I would not just worship him as some sort of messiah. I've come to that point where I'm like, okay, this is just unjust. It's a witch hunt, and screw you guys. That's where we're at. And I'm sure a lot of people
vote
feel
Behram
the same
2024. Are you on the ballot?
And I'm not. I will never go into politics. But if I survive this week, of course, after having said so much, maybe I'll be nicked. But yeah, it's quite dangerous. That's why people refrain from talking about it.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah. Here's to hoping that there's some light at the end of this tunnel. Maybe Imran has a Mandela-esque arc. Who knows? He is 70-something, so I don't know if that's even possible. One last thing that we do need to talk about, and I really want to talk about this, is that there's a lot of conversation on the surfaces in India, and we've also mentioned this in podcasts prior. There have been really sporting pitches thus far that we've seen in this series, right? Both Hyderabad and Visakhapatnam. We saw that there was something for the seamers, something for the spinners. If you apply yourselves as batters, you're going to get runs. And in the Pro Sports podcast that I do in Urdu, I mentioned that point that we discussed about how Indian batters might not develop on those extremely spin-friendly wickets. And even though they've had success abroad, that is a crop of batters that did well on different kinds of pitches. And then they came up trumps in Australia and England and all of those nations. But when you have those extremely, those ranked earners, dust bowls, maybe your own batters won't develop as well. Now we've seen good pitches. We've seen batters throwing away their wickets. So there is some merit in that conversation. And Saurav Ganguly tweeted that he's really happy with these pitches because he thinks that India have the pace bowling attack to thrive on any sort of surface. And again, he made the point of, this will allow batters to develop better. So, yeah, I mean, we've really come full circle. And I love the work the curators have done thus far.
Two brilliant pitches. Absolutely fantastic pitches. India had the team to win kind of on any surface. And they're still Indian wickets, right? Spinners weren't taken out of the game. Tom Hartley took a bunch of wickets in one of those games, right? So there's no lack of advantage, but those are the kinds of wickets that, and it's still a developing science / art, right? But those are the kinds of wickets we want all around the world where the spinners have a go, the seamers have a go, the batters have a go. Not one lot of cricketers dominate the game, right? The three major parts all play, all do that. You could play your shots, you can defend solidly, You can bowl pace. You can, swing the ball, maybe even seam the ball a little bit. You can spin it. Just you can get some bounce off your spin. Okay, it will break up later, so the balls keep low. That for me is kind of what a Test match wicket should be, and we saw essentially 2 of them. So they've been fantastic wickets, and I think in the last few years, wickets have actually been a lot better. I think we are learning a lot more on how to do things, and there are some wickets that are always going to be one-dimensional, right? There's not much you can do about those sorts of wickets, but we are learning about what makes a better wicket, and hopefully with Hawkeye data, we've just got no excuses anymore to be in the dark age, right? We can have a look at this wicket and go, okay, what went wrong? Go back to the ground staff and say to them, what do you think went wrong or right here? Or how do you think you can replicate this next time? Or what tweaks would you make, having seen, and show the data. That's the future of cricket. That's what it should be. Even in the 80s and 90s, wickets weren't particularly good. And certainly...
I mean, we just saw that surface in South Africa, right? After which Rohit said that I'm fine with playing on these surfaces, but don't complain when we make them in India. I was expecting dust bowls. So that's the surprising bit.
That's the bit that... and I think this is better for Indian cricket. I think they're still going to dominate. I think they'll still win a lot, and I think it's much better for Indian cricket. I've always said that the spinning wickets sometimes bring about a sense of randomness to the results as well. But the Pune test and the indoor test are probably testament to that. But no, absolutely no doubt. I think India are still going to win an absolute truckload of matches. But this was, and I like a good chaotic 2-day test where no one can hit the ball occasionally, but. These last two tests have been absolutely fantastic surfaces and really gripping matches where different teams had chances and were on top. And, if Stokes doesn't get run out and bent and Crawley's one did go a millimeter the other way and all, there's a couple of things. England could have given this a fair run again. So 2 really gripping, interesting test matches so far and played on good surfaces. You can't ask for much more than that. I cover a lot of cricket in my life, and neutral fans. I had an England fan last week go, "Oh, you're so anti-England." I'm like, mate, if England win a Test match when it's when they're touring India and it's the first one of the series, it's literally the best thing that happens to the rest of my month, because it means that there is a narrative, and it's going to take India at least 2 tests to get back in front of them. So for the first 3 tests of the series, I've got something to talk about. Right, the worst possible situation is that the home team wins the first one, and the away team goes, "Well, that's us done. We'll see you next time." Right? That's for me, it's about the narrative, the interest. Because if a fan, someone on YouTube here, they might watch tons of cricket. Let me tell you, if that game gets boring, they're not paying a lot of interest. I have to. Right, so it needs to be captivating for me, and I think they've been fantastic early tests.
Oh, I agree 100% with you over there, and that's the thing about pitches which are balanced in the sense that they offer everyone a bit of something, because that way the game is, as you mentioned, not one-dimensional, which it is on those 2-day Test match surfaces, ranked turners, or even like that Test match in South Africa. That wasn't a turner; it was uneven bounce, and it was the ball was going everywhere.
A shit pitch.
Yeah, it was a terrible pitch. So. What this does is it's more captivating. The game ebbs and flows. And like Jared said, that if, the home team loses the first test and the home team is India, then that sets up the entire series. If India win the first test, then our job gets a bit boring, doesn't it? So, would want to see all, 5 tests have these sort of surfaces. And I think this could be a watershed moment in Indian home tests, because they have the quality to be dominant across all sorts of surfaces, really. Even if you put them on, a green top, you've got Bumrah. He's doing this in Vizag and Hyderabad, 15 wickets in 2 games.
They won in Australia, right? They should have won in England. If they'd stuck around, I think they would have won that series. And South Africa, we've talked about that before, but realistically, again, probably had the team to win in South Africa. They're just a fantastically rounded side.
I would say that after Australia from late 90s to mid 2000s, this is probably one of the best test teams we've seen. There's South Africa as well. South Africa won a lot.
South Africa period, it was good
under
too,
Graham Smith. These are the 3 teams that you think of when you think of dominant sides in Test cricket in the recent past. It's a shame that India, or really tragic actually, that India haven't won a Test championship yet, because they were the better sides in both of those finals, but were undone by some bad cricket and conditions to a certain extent, I'd say.
Do you know what? I would say that the perfect wicket, although the Southampton wicket, had it have been a drier period, probably would have been a really good wicket as well. But I would almost argue that the wickets we've just played these last 2 Test matches on would almost be the ideal World Test Championship pitches, if you're being honest.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, obviously it would give the home team, but just from the fact that it doesn't matter what you bring, whether you bring Jimmy Anderson, what kind of batters you bring, you know, whatever. Everyone's got a chance in a Test like that.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that pretty much ends all the current affairs news. So that'll be the end of this Uncovered podcast. Might be my last Uncovered podcast, guys. So in that case, goodbye. Hopefully that's not going to happen, though. But yeah, thanks for coming in.
We'll see.
Yeah, thanks for all the comments, guys. Sunkalp says it was the best Uncovered for me so far. Yeah, really, really.
But was it the
appreciate
best
that.
overthrows?
Yeah. Was it the best overthrows or not? It was only the second overthrows, but anyway, maybe, yeah, he was there from the start. He's seen both of them. He's been with us for 2 hours. Anyway, that's it for this week. Stay with us. Well, don't stay with us, but be back with us next week for another episode of both Uncovered and Overthrows. That'll be all for today. Goodbye.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind the scenes stuff. A huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord. Express your cricket fandom with Bodyline t-shirts. Discover their extensive range of player-inspired tees, featuring cricket legends such as Murali, Warne, and Wasim. With team-themed designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds, they've got you covered no matter what your interest in cricket is.
Oh,
We're still live.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Hey, Behram.